What is going on, everyone? It's your boy Tony at the weekly close, here to report on the art of the chart and share the latest trends, thoughts and analysis from different minds all in one place. Here we are at week 10, with the subject being all eyes on Monday, making reference to Silicon Valley Bank and their fate lying in the hands of the Fed. If we kick things off, the first video we've got is from Glassnode. The title was Signals Spotting Cycle Extremes with On-Chain Data. Now, the beauty of some of these charts was that these were a combination of indicators, being the MVRV ratio, ASOPRA PWEL, and the reserve risk multiple, and kind of just showing how, when all of these are flashing on, how they detect bottoms and tops of markets as all of these kind of multiple colors you can see for each one of these cycles. For anybody who's not familiar with what these different items are, MVRV is essentially a ratio for unrealized profit and loss, SOPRA for realized profit and loss, PWEL with regards to miners' revenues, and reserve risk is useful for tracking hodlers. So on this basis of these kind of with all of these lights flashing green or red at certain heights or troughs in the market, looking at this in relation to kind of where we are in 2023, since Bitcoin's inception in the earliest days of on-chain data in 2011, it's been a kind of a useful metric when all of them are flashing to kind of point out tops and bottoms. So looking just at these here, all flashing bottom, and then there was a rise in price. These three heads of market overheating are highlighting these tops. And basically same again from 2015, and I guess most interestingly where we are now, kind of the highlighting the potential bottom with these three indicators, and the kind of the question mark of this arrow, is history going to repeat itself kind of moving forward? In this example, looking at MVRV alone, as I mentioned, a kind of unrealized profit and loss. Well, let's we don't even have to overcomplicate it. If these kind of peaks and troughs of MVRV plotted against price kind of highlights these overextensions or these market tops, and then these kind of this bottoming of market lows, well, you see exactly where that leaves us now. So interesting to be thinking of that in combination with obviously the halving cycles that we've spoken about previously. 1 year previous to the halving cycle, price accelerating. So anyway, one to watch with that in consideration. From FX Empire, this was an S&P analysis, just looking at the S&P 500, and this kind of highlights a lot of the things that we've spoken about previously. We had broken out of this downward channel. We had retested it, and unfortunately, since all the news that broke on Friday, we've dropped to levels. I think we're at. Let me just double check at the level we are at the moment. We are 3861. So we've dropped back into this channel, which is obviously very dangerous. If we were to kind of continue to move within this channel, hopefully, let's just hope if there is positive news from the Fed on Monday of maybe action being taken with regards to Silicon Valley Bank to kind of calm the markets. But also we've got the Fed meeting this week anyway in terms of rate hikes. So really a difficult one to be trading this week. Lots of fundamental news is going to be governing this. But if for anybody kind of hoping for the bullish scenario, hopefully it's just a single candle on the weekly that will kind of take us into this channel. But let's hope we can break out soon. Otherwise, we're going to have to just be watching that closely if we move further down into that channel. Others kind of commenting earlier in the week, we had kind of Jason Casper on the 4 hour this Bitcoin trade, and I guess what was interesting looking at, I think maybe a lot of people, this is fundamental news, essentially a bit of a black swan event catching everyone out, and that's why we trade accurately, carefully with appropriate risk, so that we can cover our losses in these scenarios. So no one's expected to get it 100% right, but here's the thought and the thinking behind obviously what Jason was looking at, and that was we had an upward resistance at the time, obviously slightly bullish, suggesting a potential break to the upside, but on the smaller time frame within this consolidation was obviously kind of moving equally. So the kind of question of it could have broken upwards or downwards. There's no bias, but with this kind of broader trend, it was thought that would kind of take us back up to the kind of the 23k region. But looking at the daily chart, I know that we've spoken about this previously. He was preempting this kind of this triple head and a kind of a rip to the downside like previously, but the truth is we haven't seen that. We've just, with the news on Friday, we had dropped down, and we haven't dropped down this far. He's preempting we're going to go comfortably below the 20k level, but or even lower. This is under 19, but as of the news on Friday, we saw a lot of movement just under the 20k, and I think right now at this present point in time we reclaimed 21k. But I guess the interesting things to point out of looking at the kind of the daily Bitcoin chart is the potential formation here. We've come down and done exactly what he's shown here. This kind of consolidation around the kind of the 20k level and lifted up a bit. But is this a head and shoulders looking to play out with? And if so, the kind of bias and the kind of prediction of that obviously breaking to the downside, and how that's measured from top to neckline, taking us back into the lows of the FTX collapse in November. So it'll be interesting to see and watch at the same time. From Crypto Michael, we had this video, Bitcoin price at 30k in March, and I think just the interesting quick takeaways just to be discussing are highlighting the importance of the resistance at the 23.8k, which we were kind of battling with at the time. For the US 100, he's kind of highlighted on a much larger, on the daily time frame, this kind of this downward resistance, to turn into support. Price moving away from this region, so kind of watching out for this to kind of be tested and continued. And similarly with the kind of with the Dixie, a lot of price movement within this channel, and the kind of question of, and me at the moment just kind of moving to the downside, but keeping an eye of the movement within these within this support and resistance. And I guess the interesting thing to kind of just point out about Bitcoin on the monthly was when we closed February. For those of you who kind of really watch closely and believe in the importance of these candles, we closed with a doji, a very, very small body, very large wicks, top and bottom, suggesting real kind of confusion and of an equal action both by buyers and sellers. So it doesn't really tell us much, not compared to the massive bodies and the tiny wicks of other candles, but still a lot of indecisiveness in the markets at the moment. Earlier in the week, we had a video from Marzo on the new Ethereum trade, historical support, and the question of buy or sell now. And I think just breaking down some of his thought, we've got here the Ethereum chart on the weekly, and he's just kind of highlighting this consolidation of the 200-day moving average with the 200-week moving average, and both of those sitting comfortably as support underneath price at the moment, and that still is true right now. And then there's this kind of this long sideways consolidation, this equal triangle on the weekly, which we're still moving within, and the kind of question as to where we're going to break to the upside or the downside. There's no bias at the moment, but we'll keep this in mind when we start talking about an Elliott Wave count in the next video. But I think with regards to the title, which is pointing out on this weekly chart, is just how not just the moving averages we've got as support underneath us, but also the previous 2018 bull market high sitting there to kind of offer that support. But at the same time, it's just moving from the weekly down to the daily time frame, and I think this is true of a few of the cryptos at the moment. Pointing out these kind of real gaps of volume at the moment, so anticipating the shorter term downside of that kind of gapping from the the 1560 level down to the 1360 before moving onwards. But looking at this as well, and we can see it down here, real lack of volume and conviction in this trade, and in that movement anyway. And I guess just on the higher time frame, just kind of looking back for a second, is this larger, or question rather, is this a cup and handle playing out if we zoom in to this portion? So one to kind of just keep an eye on at the moment. There's kind of incentives and hints of moves in either direction, but when with confluence and confirmation, that's what I'd be keeping an eye out on at the moment. Now, interesting, as I was just kind of mentioning, with kind of more crypto online who posted this kind of Ethereum Elliott Wave count, maybe we can kind of look and compare, some of Marzel's thoughts with this at the moment as well. And I guess this what this Elliott Wave count is going to suggest is maybe on the subject of those breakouts we were just discussing is a breakout to the upside. Because as far as I'm concerned, I share the same count as this. The fact that we've been currently in this correction, this ABC correction, and then we'll be, and this is in a 1 going into a 2, and we're going to be moving to the most impulsive part being the 3, and that's just what the Elliott Wave count says. This doesn't take into consideration news at large. This is purely an observation of the charts. But I guess the thing that you'd want to be looking or keep an eye out for is the 1, 2, and then the smaller 1, 2 playing out within this larger wave 3. So that's the kind of that's the kind of where you want price to be moving to be for the count to be confirmed to be moving to the upside. Because the alternative is that ABC could be very quickly turning into a complex correction where essentially another ABC takes place, taking you much further down to the potentially down to the $1,240 level. And for anyone wondering, and that's commonly referred to as like a WXY, a complex correction, a combination of those ABCs. So we need to see how this resolves itself at the moment. That's all that can be said. So in summary, we've seen some early signs looking at the on-chain data of a cycle bottom and on Bitcoin. This week, the fate of the markets lies with the Fed, with the meeting and the potential rate hikes in March, but also the kind of fate of Silicon Valley Bank. Before we were looking at this, 3920 was the level to be kind of tested as support, but now we've got to see how we test it as resistance if we do get positive news, and whether we start breaking that channel downwards again. And then, as kind of we've said on a few of these charts, there's short-term downside, but there's long-term positivity if we talk about the on-chain data and the Elliott Wave counts. So that concludes week 10. We look forward to giving everybody an update next week, following all the news that we look forward to receiving. So all the best until then. Ciao.